Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Asian Vision Dialogue. Today the theme of our topic is about the progress of Belt and Road Initiative and its cooperation in Cambodia. And I am very pleased to have our guest speaker, Dr. Digby Wren. Yes, he's a senior special advisor to the Institute of International Relations of Cambodia at the Royal Academy of Cambodia, and he is also an advisory board member of the Belt and Road Caucus for Asia Pacific. So without further ado, we're gonna have Dr. Wren to our discussion. Dr. Thank you for being with us once again.
Thank you. It's very nice to be invited back.
Yeah. So I have a few questions to talk about the updates, or we call the progress of BRI implementation in Cambodia. But before we jump into the details, could you kindly briefly what is Belt and Road Initiative?
The Belt and Road Initiative. So it's a strangely named thing, isn't it? I mean, the belt and the road, and people that do know about it kind of understand that it has it's about global infrastructure building around the world, and that China is basically recycling its surplus capital. Because China has surpluses, it makes money, doesn't borrow money to build things, and so they want to recycle that money. But the Belt and Road, so the road is basically A to B, so a port to a port. So that could be a seaport or an airport or a land port or a river port, any kind of a port. And then that is the road between one port and another port. So that could be a sea road, if you like, on the sea, or it could be an air, or it could be on a river, whatever. The belt part is economic belts. And so economic belts, people think about clusters, and they think about nodes and hubs. And so what that means is you might have two locations that are 100 kilometers apart, and you might go from the commodity to the brand, so from iron ore to a finished watch. Or you might, it might be a 2,000 kilometer long belt where you go from a commodity to a finished product, whatever that is. It could be food, or it could be manufactured goods, it could be anything. So, and it could also include, those belts can also include all sorts of things like education, research and development, could be digital, it could be specialization in electronics, or it could be specialization in locomotives and engines, or it could be aerospace, or it could be any kind of specialization like that. But the belt just basically means that you're going from the beginning of the process, sort of what a raw commodity of some sort, or a raw product, and then taking it to a finished product. But it could be in any area at all, so computing or aircraft or trains or whatever.
Yeah. Well, could you tell us how many types of cooperations projects in Cambodia?
Cambodia has quite a few related to, so Belt and Road is mostly about connectivity at two levels. The first level is what you might call a substructure. So that's the Belt and Roads that I was talking about. So, port to port, rail lines, roads, airports, that's the substructure. Even fiber optic cable, that's substructure. Or electric transmission lines, that's a substructure. And then the superstructure, the thing you put on top of that, is services, or things, sort of like internet, or online shopping, cross-border transactions, or shipping products on a train. That's the superstructure part of it. So the actual commerce, the goods and services that travel along that connectivity. But so, for example, in Cambodia, Belt and Road is there's hydropower. So renewable energy, which is very important. Cambodia now has about 61% capacity of renewable energy. Much of that is in hydro. So that a number of those dams have been built through the Belt and Road. And that also means that the private companies or state-owned Chinese companies, but they operate basically as private companies, they come together with a partner in Cambodia, and they say, look, this is what we need. We need a new expressway from Phnom Penh-Sihanoukville, which has just opened. Yes. And I think the Premier of China is going to be here during the ASEAN conference to launch this, and I've been on that highway. It's fantastic. So that's an example of that. And so what does that road do? I mean, that connects Phnom Penh, the capital city, to Cambodia's only deep water port. And that deep water port is another BRI project where the port has been deepened so it can take bigger ships, and it's got all sorts of improved capacity for cranes and docking and transport and better roads and all that sort of thing. But see, for example, the port itself is not just Chinese money and Chinese planning and Chinese workers. It's Cambodian workers and Japanese infrastructure as well. The Japanese have built most of the port facilities. And then there's other things. So you've got hydropower, you've got roads, and you've got ports, and you've got airports. So for example, Siem Reap, which is Angkor Wat, it's the #1 tourist destination in Cambodia and one of the most famous sites in the world. And I advise everybody to go and have a look at that. It's just amazing. I went and visited the new airport, and it's being built right now. It's the first time I've been in an airport that hasn't been fully finished, and it's the same feeling. Once you're in, it looked small from far away, and then once you were in, it took 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other. They're really big. Yeah. But that's another example. But there's also the telecommunications networks in Cambodia have been constructed through Belt and Road. Not all of them, but some of them. And there are many other projects, more roads. There's going to be a new road to the Vietnamese border. So these are examples of how the Belt and Road works in terms of infrastructure.
All right. Yes. So Cambodia have received many benefits from BRI initiative project. So can you tell us, like during the COVID-19 pandemic, are those BRI investment been affected by the COVID? Yeah.
Well, there's two forces at work here. The first force at work is that China's economy is slowing down. There's no doubt about that. For various reasons, the Americans are doing a lot to try and slow China's growth down. So the tech and trade war, not allowing them access to semiconductors, and trying to put Huawei out of business, for example. And that's slowing growth in China, but also because the Chinese are they have what's called a dual circulation. So what that basically means is they're going to demand side, they're going to generate more internal demand. And then you can imagine where they're going to import all these, where this new demand will need new products, so food, for example, or energy or whatever, and that's going to travel along the Belt and Road. And to do that, you need all sorts of services and technical capacities, and that's also part of the Belt and Road. And so one of those is health. And then, of course, when COVID happened, Cambodia was very fortunate to have China as a friend, and China was very quick to provide health support to Cambodia, not just vaccines. A very large number of vaccines. In fact, Cambodia is one of the most successful COVID countries. It was the second country in the world to get back to its pre-COVID economic activity, which is phenomenal kind of performance. Really very, very good. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that they were able to have the stability that China provided them with infrastructure and with health infrastructure through the Health Belt and Road. So vaccines, testing equipment, machinery, personal protection equipment, all those sorts of things. Cambodia benefited from that arrangement, and that's done through the Belt and Road as well. There's 140 countries in the Belt and Road. So many of these countries had the same access, but Cambodia was very fortunate, and the government here worked very closely with China, and it was very successful during COVID. But it slowed down Belt and Road investment. To come back to your question, it slowed Belt and Road investment. That's true. People couldn't travel, so it was very, very difficult if you're building something and suddenly the architect can't travel or the engineers can't travel. It becomes very difficult to continue. And so borders were closed and people had to go home, and so many Belt and Road projects were slowed, or some were stopped, but not that many actually. I think the decline, if you like, the reduction in Belt and Road activity was something like 20 to 30%. So many projects kept going, but at a slower pace. But that's picking up again now. But I don't think we're going to see the huge investments that were made, say, between 2015 and 2019. We won't revisit that. And also because the Belt and Road is now also very closely aligned with green development, sustainability, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So that's very good, but that also means that financing and everything else has to be green as well. Yes. So that slows things down as well, and the projects are going to be more carefully selected. And I think there was quite a lot of negativity about some of the projects, about too many Chinese people working on those projects, or they weren't properly thought out, or for whatever reason. So some of them have been renegotiated, etc. And look, the thing is, I think China and its Belt and Road partners have thought about this, and they've realised that, okay, we really need to sort of optimise and be more careful and introduce all the green and sustainability elements as well. The emphasis has to be on local employment, and it has to be something that is definitely going to generate economic development, and that is key. And that has always been a key thing about the Belt and Road, is it must generate economic development. If it's not going to do that, then maybe we shouldn't do it. So that's also another reason why it's going to be slower, I think. But on the other hand, the Europeans said they were going to launch something, and they've run out of money. The Americans said they were going to launch something, and just hasn't happened. So at the end of the day, as Hun Sen, the Prime Minister of Cambodia, said, if you only have one option. So, and I think that, yeah, it'll still continue, but it's going to be more concentrated and more specific, and there'll be much more, shall we say, governance than previously.
All right, thank you for your very details. So we want to know another a bit of sensitive question with regard to the participating countries in the BRI's project. That we know that this initiative has been one of the controversial projects. So do you, what do you think about the challenges that the participating countries under the BRI framework?
Well, I think some of the challenges so some of it is narrative and some of it's reality. So the narrative basically was that there's a debt trap and all that. That doesn't exist. Johns Hopkins University, which is a very, very good university in the United States, in Baltimore, has done Deborah Broughtigam is a leading scholar on this, and they have conclusively given evidence that there is no such thing as a debt trap. It just doesn't exist. I could go into all the numbers, but basically it just doesn't exist. More specifically, there are problems, for example, with environmental problems, sustainability problems, whether or not there are guarantees, whether there's insurance for the finance and things like that. And as I said before, one of the reasons that the Belt and Road investments are sort of slowing down slightly is because there is more attention to those sorts of details. So I think the environment is probably the one thing that's most critical. Some of the projects were criticised because they were built and then nothing happened. But you have to understand, if you're building a very big project, it's not like an instant return. It's not like you open a restaurant and then you're super busy the next day. It's not like that. You build a railway and it takes maybe 3, 5, 10, 20 years sometimes to start getting it back, but you've got to build it. And that is the one very special thing about building infrastructure, is that it's a long-term return on investment. And so private companies just won't do that. You can't get private capital to build really big public infrastructure. They just won't do it. It has to be done as private-public partnerships, and so the Belt and Road is doing more and more of that. Or it has to be third-party partnerships. So, for example, Japan and Korea have joined into many BRI projects in Asia. Or it's got to... you've just got to wait for the return, connecting, commodities, agriculture, minerals, energy, whatever, to pipelines, to railways, to ports. takes time. It can't all be done in 1 year or 5 years. It takes a long time. So you have to have a long view of this. So, and one needs to remember that the Belt and Road is a very long term. I mean, you're talking at something between, you know, it's existed for 10 years, and most of that infrastructure is still going to be here 50 to 100 years from now.
All right. Yes. Thanks, Dr. Wren. Now we come to the last question. We'd like to know your perspective on the future relation between Cambodia and China under this initiative. Could you briefly tell us? Yeah.
Well, I think it's very, very important. Cambodia's signed a new free trade arrangement with China. ASEAN has a free sort of trade area internally already.
Yes.
ASEAN's number one trading partner is China. China's number one trading partner is ASEAN. Cambodia has the only deep water port on the Gulf of Thailand. So that's a very important port, and I think Sihanoukville is going to be a very successful, very wealthy city. There are some concerns about sort of imagining Sihanoukville as a sort of a post-construction city. But that's going to happen, and as I said, those things take time. You can't just think about 3 years or 5 years, because that's all it is right now. You've got to think about 15, 20, 30 years. And I think Sihanoukville is going to turn into a very successful tourism, financial hub and logistics, transport hub. And it's going to be a very, very important and rich city, and that's the long-term vision. And that is also very important because Cambodia then has the ability to export its products, and it's the biggest market in the world is China. And so that's very, very good for Cambodia. Cambodia is trying to connect also to Ho Chi Minh City, across to Thailand, on land with heavy rail and road. There's high-speed rail already into Laos, and that's going to go across into Thailand and also into Vietnam and then eventually to Cambodia. The highway network's being upgraded. Look, this is all very good, and as I said, it's all long-term. And so that partnership is a very productive partnership. It's a very good one. Cambodia has had a really good run here. 7% annual GDP growth for the last 10 years. Now that's really, really good. That's top of the class in world terms. So it's off a low base, I'll have to say, and there are still a lot of problems, especially in education. But in terms of getting the economy moving, the government here has done a very, very good job. China has been part of that, and it will continue to be part of that. There's wider implications with ASEAN. So ASEAN centrality is really important. Sort of operationally within ASEAN, there's things to do. So standards with, for example, ASEAN intertrade, not using dollars, for example, and trading directly in local currencies would be highly beneficial. And there are steps to make that happen. Standardization of all the customs and tariffs and all that sort of thing needs to be done. And recovery from COVID, get people moving again and that sort of thing. Investment across the whole region. Cambodia, I think, has a very good position. Phnom Penh is a great center, a good hub for finance for the whole region. Cambodia has lots of agricultural riches, mineral riches, and it has a very good population that could do better with education. That's what I would like to see more of. That's going to, it's youth that guarantees your future. So that's the one part I would like to see really improved, but also telecommunications needs improvement. So those are all big projects for the future, and China is going to be part of that.
All right, thanks. So thank you so much, Dr. Wren. That's really very meaningful discussions. I look forward to having you once again.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Asian Vision Dialogue has now come to an end. Thank you for tuning in and hope to see you next time.